Good morning, church. Good to see you. If you would, go ahead and stand. I'm Steve. I'm glad that you've chosen to be in this place today. Do you have joy? Is that going to come out today? I hope so. Let the world see. Because of Jesus Christ, you got this joy, all right? Let's sing loud, okay? Here we go. All you people that were beggars, come on. We were the beggars, yeah. Now we're royalty. We were the prisoners. Now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. In the house of the Lord sing praise. Shout it out. There's joy in the house. There's joy in this house. Praise and honor you. You have done so much for us. We want to live this life so that the world can see that we are yours. Thank you for Jesus Christ, the perfect example.
I know someone who knows what I'm up against. I know someone who's here in the midst of it, fighting for me in a battle I can never win all on my own. I might not be able to part the waters, might not be able
time I try to make it on my own, every time I try to stay and it's starting to fall, all those lonely roads that I traveled on, there was Jesus. When the life I built came crashing to the ground, when the friends I had were nowhere to be found, I couldn't see it there, but I can see it now. There was Jesus. In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been or where I'm going, even when I didn't know it or couldn't see it, there was Jesus. Oh, this man needs amazing kind of grace, for forgiveness and a price I couldn't pay. Now, I'm not perfect, so I thank God every day. Yes, there was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been or where I'm going, even when I didn't know it or couldn't see it, there was Jesus on the mountain, in the valley,
There was Jesus.
in the shadows of the alleys,
There was Jesus.
in the fire, in the flood, always is and always was. In the waiting, in the searching, in the healing and the hurting, like a blessing buried in the broken pieces. Every minute, every moment, where I've been or where I'm going, even when I didn't know it or couldn't see, there was Jesus.
There was Jesus.
There was Jesus. There was Jesus.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. Oh, yes, you are. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire
Wow, you guys sound good. You can have a quick seat. My name is Jordan, and we are so excited that you've come to join us this morning here at Capital City Christian Church. A couple things we want to make you guys aware of before we go any further in the service, as usual. First of all, at the end of every month, we have our men's breakfast. It's a monthly thing. We're coming to the end of the month, so this coming Saturday, we will be having that down in the Family Life Center. That is from 7:30 to about 9. Breakfast is provided, so if you're a man, you're into breakfast. Normally those things go together, certainly do for me. This is your time to shine, all right? Got to get up a little bit early, but it's totally worth it. Free food, a great lesson as well. They're going through a really powerful series right now, so great opportunity to get connected with the other men in the church and to go a little deeper spiritually and to get your belly full. So it's a win, win, win. Make sure you put that on your calendar for this coming weekend. As you also know, we are entering what some refer to as Holy Week. We've got Easter coming up next Sunday, and that is a huge deal here at Capital City. We've got a whole week of festivities planned. On Thursday and Friday, we're going to be doing what we call our Encounters with Christ right here in this room. That is a series of dramatic sketches that'll put you in the shoes of the people who were with Jesus in the days leading up to his death, burial, and resurrection. So it's a really cool opportunity to come and just get in the right mindset for Easter. And we're offering that twice. Once again on Thursday from 6:30 to 8 or Friday from 6:30 to 8. All leading up to Easter Sunday, which is, of course, a big deal here. So I would just roll in whenever you feel like it Sunday morning. Get a good parking spot is the other priority. And whatever you do, don't bring anybody, okay? That's the plan for Easter Sunday, right? No. If you didn't know, April Fool's is the next day after Easter, so that was a joke. It's actually the opposite here at Capital City. Can anybody repeat for me our little 3-phrase mantra? Come early, park far, bring one. That's right. Okay, we're going to come early. We're going to have an early service. Normally we have our 9:30 and 11. We're going to have one at 8. So if you normally come to the 11, come to the 9:30. If you normally come to the 9:30, come to the 8 if you can, to make as much room in this building as possible for people. We're going to try to find a spot as far out as we possibly can. And if you know of anybody who might be receptive this time of year, many people are, we want you to bring them. Guys, and I want you to know, I don't know if you're aware, but our pastors here at Capital City practice this every week. They are here, all of them, usually before most of us are awake, and they park in the far reaches of the parking lot. This is one thing I love. They lead by example every single week, and all they're asking us to do one time is to follow their example. So I think we can all do that. Make that a priority next week. Let's repeat it one more time. We're going to come, we're going to park, we're going to bring. That's right, exactly. All right, we look forward to that next week. We want to be good hosts for Easter. We want to be good hosts in a lot of aspects of our lives, right? That's what I'm doing right now. My job sometimes on Sunday mornings is to play the host, to try to make an environment that's entertaining and welcoming and everything. How many of you guys enjoy hosting events at your house or different places? Not everybody does. I do. I love it. I love to have people over to my house or have an event, love to have a good time. I really enjoy that, something that I like to do. What I don't love to do is to prepare for said events, right? There's a lot of cooking, there's a lot of cleaning. It just takes a lot of work to be a good host. And if we're not careful, we can get caught up in all that if we're having an event and miss the most important part, which is to create an environment of welcoming, right? And that's the same in our spiritual lives. How many of us sometimes struggle to create an environment in our heart of welcoming for Jesus? The reality is, though, he's only going to use us to the degree that we create that environment to be used by him. Ben's going to lay that out for us here in just a little bit more. In the meantime, though, we're going to go into one of my favorite parts of our service every week, and that is communion. And I never want to take this for granted, guys. We get to come. The ultimate host invites us to come and fellowship with him. We were separated from him. And he has made a way for us to commune with him, to experience him. This time we're also going to have an opportunity for you to you've got the brown boxes there to give your tithes and offerings. We've also got the white bucket there, the generous bucket. If God has been extremely generous to you this week and you just want to give back a portion of what he's given to you, it's going to be your opportunity to come and give that back as well. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you to come and also prepare your hearts to think about what it means to create an environment of welcoming for Jesus Christ. Come on.
We're going to start with the big idea right off the bat, just so you can kind of hear it, you can kind of see it, you can kind of ponder it, let it sit in. We're going to spend the rest of our time unpacking it and seeing what it looks like, but I want to start with it just so you can kind of sit up there and ruminate a little bit, all right? Here's the big idea. The quality of Jesus as guest is directly related to your quality as host. The quality of Jesus as guest is directly related to your quality as host, and it means that the way in which you welcome him is going to determine the level of impact that he's able to make. I'm going to say that again. The way in which you welcome him is going to determine the level of impact that he is capable of making in your life. What Jesus can do for you is limited to some extent, not completely, not fully, but to some extent by what you allow him to do. This is a big idea, all right? I want you to sit on this one for a little bit. I want to see if maybe that makes any sense to you, and then we'll start unpacking it, all right? As we read through the Gospels, quite frequently, Jesus is consistently finding himself unwelcome. Most of the places that he ends up, he is rejected, or he's turned away. And it starts in the very beginning when Mary and Joseph arrive in Bethlehem for the census. It's a Christmas story. You're probably familiar with it, and you remember that there's nowhere for them to stay, right? They're looking, they're asking around. We're told that there's no room for them at the inn, and that has nothing to do with the Holiday Inn or a motel or anything like that. But this is the community. The community has no space for him. No one's willing to give up room for him. No one's willing to make space for him. He is rejected. Except, kind of, for this little stable. Some little type of an outbuilding that provided a little bit of shelter. When Jesus was 2 years old, he and his family have to flee Egypt because King Herod had heard about this prophecy of a baby who was being born, who was going to be king, and there was this kind of a threat to him because he's king. And so he wanted every boy around that age of 2 in Bethlehem, well, he ordered them to be killed. So the family flees to Egypt because he was unwelcome. In John chapter 1, as John opens his gospel and he begins telling the story of Jesus, he doesn't start with the Christmas story. Instead, he starts with this poetic retelling of the creation story. And he talks about Jesus as he arrives in this world. And John says that he was rejected by his own people. That specifically, his own did not receive him. They rejected him. They pushed him away. Except, there were some who didn't. Jesus' disciples were made up of Jews, Jewish people who did accept him and follow him. In Luke chapter 13, we're told of the story where Jesus has received threats from religious leaders, the big-time leaders of the Jewish faith who were based in Jerusalem. They've made these threats against him. They're threatening to kill him. And now he's standing outside of the city. In Luke 13, he's overlooking it, and we're told that he weeps because he hurts for the city that has rejected him. Except that's not exactly completely true. He wasn't rejected by everyone. This is the same city that eventually he parades into, this massive party being thrown for him as if he was this incoming, conquering king. It wasn't everyone. In Luke chapter 9, we're told that he was rejected in Samaria. Samaria was this little town outside of Judah. It was a place where people who were Jewish had intermarried with other people who weren't Jewish. It was this group of people that were largely looked down and hated by Jews. That'd be a nice way to put it. And they rejected Jesus. Jesus shows up and they reject him too. And that's kind of true, but not always. There's this other story in John chapter 4 where Jesus meets what we know as the Samaritan woman, and she kind of liked Jesus. He kind of impressed her pretty significantly. She became a pretty big fan. In Mark chapter 6, we're told that Jesus was rejected in Nazareth. That was the town that he was raised in. Mark says that when Jesus comes back to that town, he's an adult now, he's this incredible teacher, he's a prophet who's doing all these amazing things everywhere else, all these miracles. We're told that he couldn't do any miracles in Nazareth because they just didn't believe. He looked like that kid who grew up there, right? They knew him as a little kid. But Mark also tells us in that same passage that there were many there who were amazed. In John chapter 7, Jesus' family rejects him. They're unhappy with the reputation he's earning and the way in which it's negatively affecting their family. And they're basically like, hey, could you just be quiet and just come home and just stop doing the things that you're doing? His own family seemed to have rejected him. But that's not completely true, because we see Mary present in different times in his ministry. We see James, Jesus' brother, while he wasn't a believer, while Jesus was alive, he becomes one who was a staunch defender of Jesus and his sovereignty after Jesus' death and resurrection. And all of this comes back to Luke chapter 9. Very simple verse, little statement that Jesus makes. He says, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. That was kind of true. Everywhere Jesus goes, it seems as if he was rejected, but it's not completely true. He was frequently rejected, but just about everywhere he went, there was someone who accepted him. Everywhere he went, there was someone who provided for him. People took care of him and welcomed him into their home. Even so, though, the great recurring theme in Jesus' life was rejection, being unwelcome. And I think we can probably relate to that, can't we? Have you ever felt unwelcome? Can you ever recall a moment in your life when you felt unwelcome? I did a quick Google search just to find some stories, read many heartbreaking ones. I want to share just a couple of little quick ones with you. I found a story of a woman who said that she felt unwelcome by her own family. That after her divorce, her family invited her ex-husband to their home for holidays and they didn't invite her. Can you imagine? Read another story of a young man who was a foreign exchange student. He was from Germany, and his exchange program sent him to France. And he talked about going to school in France and specifically sitting in history class as a German in France as they studied World War II. And he told the racist and the hateful ways in which they treated the German kid. Can you imagine? You've experienced it. I've experienced it. In high school, there was this girl that I was talking to, and she went to the other high school in town. All right, like she was at the other school, and it was our rival. There wasn't much respect between our schools. And she was fine enough, I guess. And so she invited me over one time to her house for lunch, and there's some other friends of hers that were there. And I walked in, and when I walked in, I instantly felt unwelcome. Okay? It was kind of like in the old TV shows, you remember like the record scratches and everything goes silent. It was kind of one of those moments as I walked in. I look around the room, and I saw a bunch of guys in the room who were basketball players for her school, not my school, the rival school. And they knew me. They knew my name. And I knew their names. Some of them I had been separated from by referees in the past. It was one of those moments where I felt very unwelcome. Have you ever felt unwelcome? Have you ever walked into a place where you knew you were not supposed to be there? I think we've all felt that at some point, right? We've been in those situations where it seems like everyone else was invited, but you weren't. Or maybe you hear an inside joke and everybody laughs, but you don't because you weren't a part of it. Or maybe you feel like you're different from everyone else. Or maybe you feel like you dress differently than everyone else. I can remember when I was in high school, I had a youth sponsor who talked about a nephew of his that he would invite to his home. He'd come spend the weekend with him, and he'd invite his nephew to go to church with him. And the nephew would always say no, and the excuse he would use was that he didn't pack any clothes that he could wear to church. And so the sponsor of mine crossed lines, all right? Like this isn't advice, this is just a story. But he would go and dig through his nephew's stuff to find what he had packed. Okay, that's the crossing line part. But then after that, what he would do is on Sunday morning, he would dress according to what he owned as closely to what was in the bag of his nephew. So that then he could walk in and invite him to church, and he could say, oh, well, I didn't pack anything to wear to church. And he'd say, well, I'm wearing this. Because he didn't want something as simple as how we dress to make him feel like he was unwelcome or uninvited. Feeling unwelcome is the same as feeling unwanted, isn't it? And being unwanted hurts, doesn't it? Jesus was unwelcome in a lot of places. Most people rejected Jesus. Most. And all the places that Jesus went and all the things that Jesus did, the majority of the crowds, the majority of the people that he spoke to walked away from him. But there was always someone that accepted. There was always someone who listened. There was always someone who welcomed him. And I want to remind you of what we started out with. The quality of Jesus as guest is directly related to your quality as host. I want you to think back to Nazareth. Nazareth, that town that he grew up in, the place where Jesus was unable to do any miracles because they didn't believe, they didn't accept him, they didn't welcome him. And as a result, they didn't receive what he had to offer. Do you see how that works? What Jesus can do for you is limited to some extent by what you allow him to do, which means that how you welcome Jesus is a big deal. Which is why the story of a few of his friends, I think, is so significant. If you've been around church for a while, you've probably heard the names Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. They're siblings who were known as Jesus' friends. They lived in this little town called Bethany. It was a tiny, obscure village a couple miles east of Jerusalem. And there's a lot of stories that come out of Bethany. We're going to cover a couple of them here in a moment. What I want you to know on the front end of this is that during the 6 days of Jesus' final week of his life, the last 6 days leading up to his crucifixion, probably the most stressful and most tense and most terrifying days of Jesus' life, Jesus would spend the day in Jerusalem and the evenings in Bethany. You may know some of the stories, what happened each of those days, but every evening he would go back to Bethany where he spent the night. Because it seems as if this was a place that he found refuge and rest. And I don't think it was the town, I don't think it was Bethany that made him feel that way. I think it was the people. I think it was his friends. So you have stories like this. In Luke chapter 10, we're introduced to Mary and Martha. We're told very plainly that Martha opened her home to him. Pretty simple, right? There's an assumption here that Mary and Martha already had some sort of a relationship with Jesus. They already knew him. Their brother Lazarus already knew him. And so when he shows up in town, they open their home. They invite him in. It's an opportunity for them to reconnect with a close friend. But you need to know that when you open your home to Jesus, he has an entourage. There's a large group of people. There's a lot of hosting that takes place. And you should know that where Jesus is welcomed, Jesus goes to work. I want you to say that with me. Where Jesus is welcomed, Jesus goes to work. The very next verse says that Martha had a sister called Mary who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. Now that verse seems almost as simple as the previous, right? Innocuous enough, not too significant. But I want you to notice something. Jesus is welcomed by Mary and Martha into their home, which has now led to Mary being welcomed in Jesus' presence. And that may seem simple. That may seem like not a big idea to you or a big deal to you from just reading this simple verse, but you're missing some stuff. Mary's actually creating some problems. First of all, this is rude. Don't know if you knew this. You'll see it further in the story. But first of all, it's rude to her sister Martha. Mary bailed on her. Martha is not at Jesus' feet listening. Martha's in the kitchen. She's working. She's preparing as host. And it's not just a small little thing for her and her siblings and Jesus. We're talking 15 to 20 people. Because when Jesus shows up, he's got these 12 other dudes who are always with him. All the time. And so Martha is going to work, taking care of the needs, and Mary bails. She's sitting at the feet of Jesus. It's rude. She's ignoring her responsibility. But there's something even bigger. There's something culturally inappropriate happening here as well. Mary has put herself in a position that women weren't supposed to be in. Women aren't supposed to be in the living room. They're not supposed to be sitting at the feet of a rabbi. They're not supposed to be listening to him teach. They were supposed to be in the kitchen doing their work. She's crossing some lines here. It's not just rude, it's inappropriate. But Jesus had been welcomed by Mary and Martha, and now Jesus welcomes her to his feet. Martha speaks up. She says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. I love that. I think there was some depth to her voice when she said that. All right? Hey, I want you to hear this, all right? Mary has given Jesus a place of authority. She's welcomed him into the home, and now Mary sits at his feet. She gives him the place of authority to speak into her life. She's receiving his teachings. Martha has also given Jesus a place of authority. Martha has welcomed Jesus into her home, and now she's giving Jesus the place of authority to hold Mary accountable. He's not just welcome in their home. This is more than that. This is more than just being welcome. He's given a premier position. He's given authority in their home. So Jesus takes the place of authority. He teaches in the living room, and he rebukes Martha. Not Mary, but Martha. But this is an incredible sign of welcome, right? If you let Jesus into your house, don't be surprised when a few things in your house get rebuked. It's going to happen. When you let Jesus into your life, he's going to call out some things that don't belong. And both Mary and Martha, they're both welcomed as his disciples. Both are welcome at his feet to learn. Both are challenged by his authority, because where Jesus is welcomed, Jesus goes to work. Now, according to some scholars, about 2 months later, it could have been more, could have been less. We really actually don't know. But we'll say, for the sake of this, a couple months later, Jesus has left Mary and Martha's house. It's months later now, and he's back out on the road. He's doing ministry, and a messenger shows up. And he tells Jesus, the one you love is sick. The one you love is sick. This message is from Mary and Martha. It's John chapter 11. It's about Lazarus. And this isn't information. This isn't an update. This isn't information. This is invitation. It's an invitation. They had invited Jesus. They had welcomed Jesus when life was good. They're offering an invitation now when life gets tough. And I think it's because Mary and Martha get it. They believed it. Where Jesus is welcomed, Jesus goes to work. And they needed some work done. For whatever reason, Jesus doesn't rush it. He doesn't respond quickly. Maybe it's because of some of the threats that were happening around Jerusalem to him. He knew that Bethany was a little too close, was a little unsafe, or maybe Jesus was just up to something. It's probable that by the time Jesus even hears about Lazarus, that Lazarus is already dead, which makes Jesus' response very strange. Jesus responds to the messenger and says, go back, tell them the sickness is not going to end in death, which is really weird, because he's probably already dead. Then Jesus says this. He says it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And that's weird. But just wait. After a couple of days, Jesus leaves for Bethany. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has already been in the tomb 4 days. When Jesus shows up, Martha comes out and meets him, and they have this conversation. She makes an interesting request. Maybe. I'm not sure exactly what she's doing here. She says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you want. What did she mean by this? What did she mean by that? Is she expecting Jesus to do something now? Is she saying that she still believes in Jesus regardless of what has happened? That she still even believes in his power? I'm not exactly sure what she means by this. Martha and Jesus have a conversation back and forth. It's really fascinating. She engages Jesus intellectually, even in the midst of her mourning and in the midst of her grieving. And she's not really angry with Jesus. They have this conversation. It goes back and forth, and it eventually leads to Martha's great confession. She says, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. It's interesting. There's only a few people in the Gospels who have an opportunity to make a great confession. Peter's confession is probably most famous. This is the only time a woman makes the same confession. Martha is a close friend of Jesus who has welcomed him into her life. She has begged him to come into her life, especially in this moment of pain and anguish. She sees who he is. Just over and over and over again. It didn't matter what the circumstances were around her. She welcomes Jesus into her life. And where Jesus is welcomed, Jesus goes to work. Read it with me. Where Jesus is welcomed, Jesus goes to work. And when Jesus goes to work, cool things happen. In verse 39, Jesus commands the stone to be rolled away, which creates an awkward moment. Martha actually tells him not to. She intervenes. She expresses some concern. She says that there's going to be a smell. He's been in there 4 days. There's an offensive odor. But this is also an offensive action. One of the most significant ways that you could offend a Jewish man in this time would be to disturb his grave. It's offensive. But Jesus was welcomed. So now Jesus goes to work. And if you welcome Jesus, there may be a stench that you become very aware of. When you welcome Jesus, he may offend you. He may disturb some of the things in you that have long been dead. So Jesus doesn't stop there. He continues his work. He says a simple prayer, and then he offers 3 simple words after his prayer. We're told, in fact, that he shouts these words. He says, "Lazarus, come out." I don't know why he shouted. I don't know if it was maybe a sign of authority. Maybe he's shouting because there's a large group there and he wants them all to hear his words. Maybe there's the sound of grieving and mourning that's taking place. It's the sniffles of crying people. So he shouts in a way that everyone can hear what it is that he's commanded to happen. Whatever the reason, he shouts. And then we're told that the dead man came out. His hands and feet were wrapped with strips of linen, and cloth was around his face. A man who had been dead 4 days is now suddenly walking, probably hopping out of his tomb as he's wrapped up, which is kind of funny to think about. You're allowed to laugh at this stuff. This miracle wasn't for entertainment, though. This wasn't for entertainment, it's for evidence. Jesus doesn't bring him out of the tomb to entertain the people or to impress them. It's for evidence. In fact, this resurrection has very little to do with Lazarus. It has very little to do with him. Lazarus is going to die again. These people are going to grieve again. These same people are going to one day mourn and grieve the life of Lazarus and his death again. It's going to feel like a reunion. And if the crowd missed the message, they missed the most important part. Jesus is making it very clear he is not God's man. He is the God-man. And where Jesus is welcome, Jesus goes to work. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they welcomed Jesus, and it led to crowds putting their faith in Jesus. We're told that in the next couple of verses that these crowds were so impressed at Lazarus coming to life that people began flocking to see what was going on, and many began putting their faith in Jesus, which means that it created some other problems. It leads to a plot to kill Jesus and Lazarus. Can you imagine? The very next chapter 12 of John, we're told that these crowds just kept growing because they wanted to see Lazarus, they wanted to see Jesus, and the chief priests were threatened by this, and they had to get rid of them both. How lucky for Lazarus to be raised from the dead only to have death threats made against you. Nonetheless, where Jesus is welcome, Jesus goes to work. Scholars say about 2 months later, we don't know, it could be more, it could be less. A couple months later, Jesus is traveling, but now he finds himself in Bethany. We're told that it was 6 days before the Passover. In our calendar, that would have been yesterday. It's the day before the triumphal entry, which we call Palm Sunday, which is today. We're told that a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. I bet there was. Jesus finds himself back in Bethany maybe for the first time. Lazarus is feeling good as ever. And when Jesus shows back up in town, I bet there was a party. I bet they did have a dinner. We're told Lazarus is there. Imagine the scene. Jesus and his resurrected friend sitting around a table with his disciples. And Jesus is the head. He's the one in position of authority. He's in a home where he has been given freedom to do his work. And we have a family who's feasting in the presence of Jesus. It's authentic church life. It's all in John chapter 12, and we're told that Mary does something special. This is the same Mary that sat at his feet when he taught in her living room. This is the same Mary who led Jesus to tears at Lazarus' tomb. I skipped that part of the story before. Remember Martha's conversation. She has this conversation with Jesus that leads to her great confession, and her conversation engages Jesus intellectually. But after her conversation, she goes and she gets Mary, and Mary meets Jesus outside, and she has a conversation with Jesus that was very different. Mary shows up at the grave of Lazarus and she speaks in pain and in emotion. And it leads Jesus to weep. It's the same Mary, months later now, at a celebratory dinner. She takes some perfume. We're told that it was a pint of pure nard, which sounds weird, but it's expensive perfume. She begins pouring it on Jesus' feet, and she gets down on the ground, and she begins wiping his feet with her hair, covering them in this perfume. We're told that the entire house is filled with the fragrance of the perfume. There's some bickering among the disciples, predominantly Judas in the background. We're told that this perfume was worth about a year's salary. Central Kentucky has an average annual salary right now around $45,000. Could you imagine owning some sort of a bottle of perfume valued at $45,000 and pouring it over Jesus' feet? This is probably the family's inheritance. This is probably their savings and their future and their security. This is an act of extravagant worship, of profuse loyalty. This is a larger-than-life beauty. This is a lavish love and devotion. This is welcoming and hosting and inviting in a way that supersedes all the ways that had happened earlier. And she anoints Jesus as if he were king. Because he was.
Yes.
Kind of. All of this was done by Mary with an eye looking backwards. All this was an act of celebration and thankfulness and gratefulness for Jesus and what he's done for her brother, Lazarus, bringing him back to life. But Jesus doesn't see it that way. Jesus interprets this act as preparation for his burial. He says that Mary has anointed him as one would a corpse, a royal corpse. She's looking back at Lazarus. Jesus is looking forward to the cross that he was going to be on in less than a week. I wonder if there was any smell left of this perfume on his feet as he washed the feet of the disciples the night before. I wonder if there's any smell of this perfume on his feet as the guards were grabbing them and nailing them to the cross. I wonder. Mary, Martha, Lazarus, this was a family that valued Jesus for his supreme worth. They welcomed him into their home. They welcomed him into their life. And 6 days later, Jesus goes to work for their souls. So pay attention to what they did. They gave Jesus his rightful place as absolute, exclusive authority. He was not just a welcomed guest. Jesus was made master of their house because that is what he deserves. Because that is who he is. Their home became Jesus' home. The one who had nowhere to lay his head was welcomed there. He did have a place to lay his head because they made a place for him. So don't forget where we started. The quality of Jesus' guest is directly related to your quality as host. Meaning, the way in which you welcome him will determine the level of impact that he's able to make. Have you welcomed him simply as a guest? Or have you made him ruler of your home? Have you welcomed him? If so, you'll see ways in which he's welcomed you back. Has he welcomed you at his feet as a disciple like he did Mary? If he's welcome, he will. Has he rebuked you like he did Martha? Has he called out selfishness in you? If he's welcome, he will. Has your sin been disturbed? Are you dealing with your own stench like Lazarus? Is he making dead things come alive in you? If he's welcome, he will. To what degree have you let him move in? To what degree have you welcomed him? What he can do for you is limited to some extent, not fully, not completely, but to some extent by what you allow him to do. He will not take a position higher than what you give him. And it's weird because he's the King of Kings. But he will refuse any position that you will not give him. Yet. There's going to be a day. There's a day coming when every knee will bow. So what do you look like? Are you more like Bethlehem, the city that rejected him and wouldn't welcome him in? Or do you look more like Bethany, a place where he found welcome? Do you look more like the culture that we live in right now that does everything they can to work to reject Jesus? Or do you look more like a Christian, a Jesus welcomer, a Jesus follower? Do you look more like the one who gives him ultimate, supreme place of authority? Seriously, is he welcome with you? Have you welcomed him? Maybe he's a guest, but he needs to be made Lord. That would be a great conversation for us to have this morning. Maybe he's someone that you've heard of, but he's never been in your home and you need to invite him in for the first time. I don't know what that looks like for you. But if you feel the Spirit nudging you, moving you towards some sort of a decision, let's have that conversation. I'll be sitting right up front. I'd love to do that. If maybe after the service you want to talk, I'll be up front. Doc will be in our connections room as you walk out into the foyer to your left. We also have a prayer room right here where an elder is currently praying for you right now. They'd love to pray with you or for you. Have those conversations with you as well. Don't let the Spirit move by without responding to it. Make sure you take the opportunity, take that advantage of this opportunity to welcome Jesus into your life. Stand and let's sing.
Tell the sun to rise every morning, color the sky with the shades of his glory, makes us with mercy and love, Jesus does. Who holds the orphan, comforts the widow, cries for injustice, feels every sorrow, carries the pain of his children, Jesus does.
So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son. Praise to the Spirit who's living in us. When I was a sinner, He saved me from who I was. 'Cause that's what Jesus does.
Who understands the heart of the sinner, showers his grace over all our mistakes, washes us clean with his blood, Jesus does. Who sings a song, a sweet forgiveness, who stole the keys to hell and the grave, who has the power to save, Jesus does. I believe that he does.
So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son. Praise to the Spirit who's living in us. When I was a sinner, He saved me from who I was. Oh, what a friend! Oh, what a Savior! He's always been good. He's always been faithful. He came to my rescue when I needed Him most and saved my soul. So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son. Praise to the Spirit who's living in us. When I was a sinner, He saved me from who I was. So we sing praise to the Father who gave us the Son. Praise to the Spirit who's living in us. When I was a sinner, He saved me
perfect example, and we know that this is how we want to live. God, I ask as we leave this place today that we're reminded of the work that Jesus Christ has done on a cross. And be reminded that we have a job to do in this world, that we can't just sit by. So we welcome Jesus into our life in a way that he hasn't before. We expect your Spirit to move within us. We expect the world around us to be changed because your power is at work within us. God, thank you so much. It is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Surrender your heart completely. See what God does to you this week, okay? Hope to see you again next week.